The ship floated in pieces through the cold darkness of space. Jake Holloway stood at the window of his freighter and watched the wreckage drift past like broken bones. The drifting star had been hauling cargo through the Orion Spur for 3 weeks, and this was the last thing he expected to find. "That's a Draken ship," Chloe Bennett said from the pilot's seat. Her voice was flat and careful, the way it always got when she was scared, but didn't want to show it. "We should go. Right now." Jake didn't answer. He kept staring at the twisted metal and shattered hull plates spinning slowly in the void. The Draken were legends, and not the good kind. Every child in human space grew up hearing stories about them. They were ancient creatures, older than most civilizations. They had wings and scales and fire in their bellies. They had burned entire planets down to ash. They were monsters, but the ship out there was dead. Whatever had killed it had done the job thoroughly. Explosions had torn it apart from the inside, leaving nothing but scattered debris and darkness. "I'm picking up something on the emergency frequency," Sam Ortega called out from his station at the back of the bridge. He was the engineer, a quiet man with clever hands and a good heart. "It sounds like—" "I don't know what it sounds like." Jake walked over and listened. Through the static and noise came a small sound. It was high-pitched and trembling. It almost sounded like crying. "That's a distress signal," Jake said. "That's a Draken distress signal," Chloe corrected him. "Which means we leave it alone and fly away very fast. Something's alive over there. Something dangerous is alive over there. Jake, please. I've seen the history files. The Draken killed billions. They don't need our help." Jake understood her fear. He felt it too, sitting cold and heavy in his stomach. But he also heard that sound coming through the speakers, that small frightened cry that didn't sound like a monster at all. It sounded like something young and lost and terrified. "I'm going over," he said. Chloe closed her eyes and let out a long breath. Sam just nodded and started preparing the airlock. They had worked together for 5 years now, and they knew Jake well enough to understand that arguing wouldn't change his mind. When he decided to do something stupid and kind, he did it no matter what. The spacewalk took 20 minutes. Jake moved through the debris field carefully, using small bursts from his suit thrusters to avoid the spinning chunks of metal. The Draken ship had been beautiful once, he could tell. The design was elegant in a way that human ships never quite managed, all flowing curves and organic shapes. Now it was just garbage drifting through the dark. He found an opening in what remained of the hull and pulled himself inside. His helmet light cut through the blackness, showing him corridors filled with floating debris and strange alien equipment. The air was gone, the power was dead, and everything was cold and silent. The crying sound led him deeper into the wreck. He followed it through twisted passages and broken doorways until he reached a room that made him stop and stare. It had been a nursery. He could tell by the small beds built into the walls and the soft materials that still clung to some surfaces. Incubation tubes lined one section, most of them shattered and empty. Whatever had happened here had killed almost everything. Almost everything in the corner, curled up tight against the cold metal floor, was a creature about the size of a large dog. Its scales were purple and silver, shimmering even in the dim light of Jake's helmet lamp. It had small wings pressed flat against its body and a long tail wrapped around itself for warmth. 6 eyes blinked open when the light touched it, and Jake saw fear in every single one of them. It was a baby. A Draken baby, alone and freezing and scared out of its mind. The creature let out another cry, the same sound that had been coming through the radio. Up close, it was even more heartbreaking. This wasn't a monster. This was a child who had watched its whole world fall apart. Jake knelt down slowly, keeping his movements gentle. The little Draken flinched back at first, pressing itself harder against the wall. But Jake didn't reach for it. He just waited, letting it look at him, letting it understand that he wasn't there to hurt it. "Hey there," he said softly, even though he knew it couldn't hear him through the vacuum. "Hey, little one. It's okay. You're okay now." The Draken's 6 eyes studied him. Its nostrils flared, trying to catch a scent through air that wasn't there. Then, slowly, it uncurled just a little bit. Its snout stretched forward and pressed against the glass of Jake's helmet. Something passed between them in that moment. Jake couldn't explain it then and wouldn't be able to explain it later. But he felt it, a connection forming in the silence between 2 living things who had no business understanding each other. "I'm going to take you home," Jake said. "I'm going to keep you safe." Getting the creature back to the drifting star was complicated. Jake had to rig up a makeshift carrier from salvaged materials and hope the little Draken wouldn't panic during the trip. But it seemed to understand that he was trying to help. It stayed still and quiet as he worked, watching him with those strange 6 eyes. When the airlock finally cycled and Jake stepped back onto his own ship, Chloe and Sam were waiting for him. Their faces went through several expressions very quickly when they saw what he was carrying. Shock came first, then fear, then something that might have been wonder. "Jake," Chloe said slowly, "that's a dragon." "I know. You brought a dragon onto our ship." She was alone. She was scared. I couldn't leave her there to die. The little Draken chose that moment to let out a small chirp. It wasn't a scary sound. It was almost cute in a weird alien way. Sam's expression softened first. He had always been the gentle one. "What are we supposed to do with it?" he asked. Jake looked down at the creature in his arms. It had stopped shaking. Its eyes were drooping closed, exhausted from fear and cold and everything it had been through. Against all logic and common sense, it was falling asleep in his arms. "We take care of her," Jake said. "That's what we do." Chloe opened her mouth to argue, but she stopped when she saw the look on Jake's face. It was the same look he'd had when he found her stranded on a dead station 6 years ago. The same look he'd had when he gave Sam a job after everyone else had turned him away. It was the look of a man who had made up his mind to help someone, and nothing in the universe was going to stop him. She sighed and shook her head. "Fine, but when this thing grows up and eats us all, I'm going to say I told you so." Jake smiled and carried the sleeping Draken toward the cargo bay, where the heating vents would keep it warm. Behind him, his crew followed, already starting to figure out how to take care of something none of them had ever imagined taking care of. In the cold darkness outside, the debris field continued to drift. But inside the drifting star, something new was beginning. Something that would change everything. The news spread fast. In space, rumors traveled faster than light, jumping from station to station and ship to ship until the whole galaxy knew what Jake Holloway had done. A human had taken a Draken hatchling. A human was keeping one of the most dangerous creatures in the universe as a pet. The reactions were not kind. The Valari Confederacy sent an official message demanding that the creature be destroyed immediately. They were a proud species with long memories, and their ancestors had suffered greatly during the Draken Wars. The Kreth Dominion was even angrier. They accused humanity of trying to create a living weapon, of planning to use the monster against their enemies. Threats were made. Warnings were given. The whole galaxy seemed to agree on one thing. Jake had made a terrible mistake, but humanity, as usual, didn't care what the rest of the galaxy thought. Back on the drifting star, life continued in its strange new normal. The little Draken had claimed the engine room as her favorite spot. The heating vents there kept everything warm, and she would curl up in the corner for hours, watching Sam work on the machinery with her 6 curious eyes. "She likes you," Jake said one morning, finding Sam hand-feeding the creature small pieces of protein paste. Sam shrugged, but he was smiling. She's not so bad. Kind of like a cat, if cats had scales and could probably burn holes through steel. They needed a name for her. Calling her the Draken or the Creature felt wrong, especially now that she was starting to feel like part of the crew. Chloe suggested something fierce and intimidating to match what she would eventually become. Sam thought they should use something scientific and proper. Jake just watched the little dragon sleep, noticing the way her scales glowed with a soft, warm light when she was comfortable and content. Ember, he said. Her name is Ember. The name stuck. Ember grew quickly in those first few months, but not in the way anyone expected. She didn't become aggressive or wild. She followed Jake around the ship like a puppy, chirping at him when she wanted attention. She learned to recognize the sound of Chloe's voice and would come running whenever she heard it. She figured out how to nudge open doors with her snout and would let herself into whatever room the crew was in, just to be near them. The thing that surprised everyone most was how gentle she was. She could have scratched the walls with her claws, but she kept them carefully retracted. She could have knocked things over with her growing tail, but she moved with surprising grace. It was like she understood that this ship was her home now, and she didn't want to damage it. Dr. Nina Reyes arrived 3 months after Jake found Ember. She was a xenobiologist from Earth, sent by the Frontier Research Division to study the situation. Most of the galaxy expected her to confirm that the Draken was dangerous and needed to be put down. What she found instead was something completely different. Her stress levels are almost zero, Nina reported after a week of observation. Her growth is healthy and stable. And look at this. She showed Jake a readout on her tablet. These are her brain patterns when she's near you. They're identical to the bonding patterns we see in human children with their parents. Jake frowned at the screen. What does that mean? It means she's attached to you. Deeply attached. In her mind, you're not just her caretaker. You're her family. The word hit Jake harder than he expected. He looked over at Ember, who was currently trying to fit her increasingly large body into a small cargo crate because she liked the cozy feeling. Her tail stuck out the end at an awkward angle. I found her alone, he said quietly. She'd lost everything. Everyone. And you gave her something new, Nina replied. You humans do this, you know. It's remarkable. Your species has this instinct to adopt things, to care for things that aren't your own. You keep wolves in your houses and call them your best friends. You form emotional attachments to machines. You rescue baby birds and cry when your plants die. That's just what you do. When something needs help, you help it. Nina smiled. That's not just what you do. Most species don't work that way. Most species see something strange and dangerous, and they run away or they kill it. Humans see something strange and dangerous and lonely, and they try to make friends with it. The months continued to pass. Ember grew to the size of a large dog, then larger. Her wings developed properly, and she learned to spread them out, though there wasn't room on the ship for her to actually fly. Her scales hardened from soft baby skin into proper armor. She could breathe fire now, small controlled bursts that she practiced in the cargo bay under Sam's careful supervision. She also learned to talk. It started with simple mimicry. Ember would repeat sounds she heard, copying the rhythm of human speech, even though she didn't understand the words. But slowly, meaning began to attach to the sounds. She learned that food meant protein paste was coming. She learned that sleep meant it was time to curl up in the engine room. She learned that good girl meant she had done something right, and that phrase became her favorite. One evening, Jake was sitting alone on the bridge, watching the stars drift past. He hadn't heard Ember approach. Her movements were getting surprisingly quiet for something so large. Suddenly, he felt a warm snout press against his shoulder. Jake, Ember said. Not perfectly clear, but close enough. "Jake sad?" He turned to look at her. 6 eyes stared back at him with an expression that looked very much like concern. "I'm okay, Ember. Just thinking." "Think too much." She pressed closer, her body warm against his side. "Ember here." Jake not alone. Something tight in Jake's chest loosened. He reached up and rubbed the ridge above her eyes, the spot she liked best. She made a rumbling sound of contentment, almost like a giant cat purring. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know, I'm not alone." The galaxy continued to send angry messages. The Valari demanded action. The Kreth made threats. Other species watched from a distance, waiting to see what would happen, expecting the situation to end in disaster as any reasonable creature would predict. But aboard the drifting star, a man and a dragon sat together in the glow of distant stars, neither one of them monsters. Both of them exactly where they belonged. Nina Reyes eventually returned to Earth to write her report. The document she produced would change the way the entire galaxy thought about the Draken. But even she couldn't fully capture what she had witnessed on that small freighter ship. Some things had to be seen to be believed. Some things had to be felt. Humans and Draken weren't supposed to be friends. They weren't supposed to understand each other. They weren't supposed to sit together in comfortable silence and share warmth in the cold of space. But no one had told Jake that. And no one had told Ember, so they just kept doing it anyway. 3 years changed everything. Ember was no longer a small creature who could fit in Jake's arms. She had grown to the size of a horse, her body long and powerful and covered in scales that shone like purple and silver metal. Her wings could spread wide enough to fill the entire cargo bay. Her claws were sharp as knives. Her fire burned hot enough to melt through solid steel. She was, by any fair measure, one of the most dangerous things in the known galaxy. She also refused to go to sleep unless Jake read to her every night. The same routine. Ember would settle down in her spot in the engine room, the warm place near the heating vents where she had slept since she was a baby. She would arrange her tail just right and fold her wings against her back. Then she would look at Jake with those 6 patient eyes and wait. Jake would sit down beside her with his old datapad, the one filled with books from Earth. He would read to her for an hour, sometimes 2, his voice low and steady while her eyes slowly closed. She liked adventure stories best, tales of heroes and journeys and discoveries. She would make small sounds of excitement at the good parts and rumble with displeasure when something sad happened, only when her breathing slowed and her scales dimmed to their sleeping. Glow would Jake quietly get up and leave her to rest. "You know, she's not actually a child, right?" Chloe said one evening, watching this ritual from the doorway. "She's a Draken, an apex predator, a creature that could destroy a city." "She likes the stories," Jake replied simply. "They help her sleep." Chloe shook her head, but she was smiling. She had stopped being afraid of Ember a long time ago. They all had. The drifting star had become famous in this part of space. Other ships knew their route, knew their reputation. They also knew what happened to anyone who threatened them. Pirates had learned this lesson the hard way. 6 months ago, a group of raiders had tried to board the freighter. They were Kreth, big and aggressive and confident in their weapons and numbers. They had disabled the ship's engines and forced their way through the airlock, expecting easy prey. What they found instead was Ember. She had been sleeping when the attack started, but the sound of weapons fire woke her quickly. By the time the raiders reached the cargo bay, she was waiting for them. The first one through the door barely had time to scream before a wall of fire engulfed him. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, only 2 of the raiders were still alive. Ember had let them go on purpose, pushing them back to their ship with careful bursts of flame. She wanted them to leave. She wanted them to tell others what they had seen. They did. Word spread through the pirate networks quickly. The drifting star was protected by a dragon. Anyone stupid enough to attack it deserved what they got. But Ember's protection went beyond just fighting. She patrolled the hull during spacewalks. Her body easily adapted to the vacuum with specialized suits Sam had designed for her. She could spot damage that the ship's sensors missed. She could reach places that human hands couldn't. She treated the freighter like it was her own body, something to be cared for and defended. And she brought gifts. This was something Jake hadn't expected. Ember would find things during her spacewalks, bits of interesting salvage or pretty rocks or unusual debris. She would carry them back to the ship in her claws and present them to the crew with obvious pride. Sam got pieces of old machinery. Chloe got shiny crystals. Jake got whatever Ember thought was most special. "She's nesting," Nina Reyes said during one of her research visits. "This is behavior we see in pack animals. She's bringing resources back to her family. She's trying to contribute. She's trying to impress us," Jake corrected with a smile. "Look at her face when she gives something to Sam. She looks like a kid showing off a drawing." Nina laughed. "That too. Drac and Young apparently seek approval from their pack elders. She wants you to be proud of her." They were proud. Every single day, the bond between Ember and the crew grew stronger with time. She learned more words, more ways to express herself. She understood jokes now and would make a coughing sound that was her version of laughter. She worried when Jake stayed up too late working. She celebrated when Chloe had good news. She sat quietly with Sam when he was sad about things he never talked about. She also began to remember, not clearly, not in words she could share. But sometimes Ember would grow quiet and still, staring at nothing, her scales flickering with colors that didn't match her usual patterns. During these moments, Jake would sit beside her and wait. "Ember remembers the fire," she said one night, her voice smaller than usual. "Remembers the dark. Remembers being alone." Jake put his hand on her snout. "You're not alone now. Never alone now. Ember has pack. Ember has family." She pressed closer to him. "Jake saved Ember. Ember will always save Jake." Nina published her research paper that year. It was called Bonds Beyond Biology, and it argued something that the galaxy had never considered. The Draken weren't naturally evil. They weren't born destroyers. They were pack creatures who had been isolated and traumatized for thousands of years, alone in the dark between stars, with no family to ground them. Give them connection. Give them belonging. Give them the chance to be part of something. And they transformed into something completely different. The paper caused arguments across the galaxy. Some species refused to believe it. Others were curious. A few quietly admitted that they had always wondered if things could have been different. But on the drifting star, nobody needed convincing. Jake watched Ember chase Chloe through the corridor, both of them laughing as Chloe pretended to flee from the terrible monster behind her. Sam was working on a new heating coil for Ember's sleeping spot, muttering to himself about temperature regulation. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past in their endless dance. This was family. Strange and unexpected and wonderful. 3 years ago, Jake had reached into the wreckage of a dead ship and pulled out a frightened child. He had brought her home because leaving her to die felt wrong. He hadn't known then what he was starting. He couldn't have guessed how much this one choice would change. But looking at Ember now, watching her joy and her growth and her love for the people around her, he knew he would make the same choice again, every single time. "Jake," Ember called from down the corridor. "Jake, come play. Ember is winning." He laughed and stood up from his seat. There would be time for work later. Right now, his dragon needed him. They came from the darkness between stars, From places where no light had shone for 10,000 years, 300 ships emerged from the void without warning. They were ancient vessels, built in an age before humans had learned to walk upright. Their hulls were covered in patterns that seemed to move and shift. Their weapons glowed with energy that made the sensors of the drifting star scream with alarm. The Draken remnant had come for their lost. Child. Jake stood on the bridge and watched the fleet spread across the view screen like a net closing around them. Chloe's hands moved over her controls, but there was nowhere to run. Sam was already below, trying to coax more power from engines that couldn't outrun a single one of these ships, let alone 300 human vessel. The voice that came through the communication system was old and cold and heavy with power. You have taken something that belongs to us. Return the hatchling and you will be permitted to leave. Refuse and you will burn. Ember stood beside Jake. She had grown so much since he found her, but right now she seemed smaller somehow. Her scales flickered with colors he had never seen before. Her 6 eyes were wide. "They're my people," she said quietly. "The ones from before. The ones who were supposed to protect me." "What do you want to do?" Jake asked. She looked at him, and for a long moment she said nothing. Then her scales settled into their normal purple and silver, and her expression hardened. "Ember wants to stay. This is Ember's home. You are Ember's family." Jake nodded. He had expected that answer. He had hoped for it too. He reached for the communication controls and opened a channel to the waiting fleet. "This is Commander Jake Holloway of the freighter Drifting Star. I hear your demand." The answer is no. Silence stretched across the void. Then the old voice spoke again, and now there was something dangerous in it. "You dare refuse us? We are the Draken remnant. We have burned civilizations to ash. We have destroyed empires that thought themselves eternal. What makes you think your tiny ship can stand against us?" "I don't think that," Jake admitted. "I know you could kill us easily. But Ember is part of my crew. She's part of my family. And I don't abandon family. The hatchling is not yours. She belongs to her people. She belongs with us. Then ask her what she wants." Another long pause. Jake could feel the weight of attention from 300 ships pressing down on them. Then the voice returned, and this time it was speaking directly to Ember. "Child, come home. Come to your true family." Ember moved forward to the communication console. Her claws clicked against the deck plates as she walked. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "I am home." The response was immediate. The nearest Draken ship fired a warning shot, a blast of energy that passed close enough to make the drifting star shake. Alarm screamed. Chloe called out damage reports, but Ember did something that no one expected. She lifted her head and began a broadcast. Not in the human languages she had learned, but in something older. Sounds came from her throat that Jake had never heard before, frequencies that made his bones vibrate and his heart race. It was the ancient language of her species, the one they used to speak across the vast distances of space. The message was simple. 3 concepts, expressed in ways that predated words. These are my pack. They saved me when I was alone. Harm them and answer to me. The energy readings from the Draken fleet changed. Jake watched the sensors with confusion. The weapons weren't powering down exactly, but something was shifting. The ships were still surrounding them, but they had stopped advancing. "What is she doing?" Chloe whispered. "She's claiming us." Sam's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. "She's telling them we belong to her." The old voice returned. It sounded different now, uncertain. "Child, you cannot bond with prey animals. They are not of our blood." "Blood is not all that makes family," Ember replied, switching back to human speech. "They found me in the dark. They gave me warmth. They gave me a home. They taught me that I could be more than what our people became. We are what we are. We are the fire that burns between stars. We are the death that comes in the night. You are afraid." Ember's voice was soft now, almost sad. "I remember being afraid, alone in the cold, waiting to die. These humans were not afraid. They reached out to me. They chose kindness when they could have chosen safety." The standoff lasted 6 hours. During that time, Ember continued to broadcast. She shared memories, not in words, but in feelings and images that the Draken could understand. She showed them Jake reading to her in the engine room. She showed them Chloe teaching her to play games. She showed them Sam building things to make her comfortable. She showed them 3 years of small kindnesses that had rebuilt her broken heart. And slowly, something changed in the fleet around them. At the end of the 6th hour, a single ship broke formation. It was the largest vessel in the Remnant, an ancient thing covered in scars from battles fought before humans discovered fire. It approached the drifting star slowly, its weapons dark. A request came through the communication system. Not a demand. A request. "May we board?" Jake looked at Ember. She looked back at him. "Yes," he said. The creature that came through the airlock was the oldest living thing Jake had ever seen. Her scales had faded from whatever color they once were to a dull gray that seemed to absorb light. Her 6 eyes were clouded but still sharp. Her wings hung heavy on her back, tired from carrying the weight of centuries. Her name was Scorith. She was the matriarch of the Draken Remnant, the last of those who remembered the burning of their homeworld. She moved through the ship slowly, looking at everything. The comfortable common areas. The kitchen where food was prepared with care. The engine room with its warm spots designed for a growing dragon. She found Ember in the cargo bay. The hatchling was curled up beside Jake, watching an old movie on his cracked datapad. The same kind of thing they did every evening when Jake didn't have work to finish. He had fallen asleep partway through, his hand resting on her snout. "He does that," Ember said quietly to Scorith. "He works too hard. Ember worries about him." Scorith stood very still for a long moment. Her ancient eyes moved from Ember to Jake to the glowing screen, showing images of a story from a world she had never visited. "We searched for you," she said finally. "When your nursery ship was destroyed, we searched. We never stopped searching. I know. We thought you were dead. We thought we had lost another child to the cold and the dark. You did lose her." Ember's voice was gentle. "The child you knew died in that wreckage. But these humans gave me a new life. A better life." Scorith was quiet again. Then, slowly, she lowered her massive body to the deck. She settled down beside Ember and Jake, her ancient warmth mixing with theirs. "Show me," she said. "Show me what they gave you." So Ember did. She shared everything. Not just the good moments, but the hard ones too. The first frightened nights. The times when she didn't understand. The slow building of trust and love and belonging. When she finished, Scorith's clouded eyes were wet. "We forgot," the matriarch said. "In our grief and rage and isolation, we forgot what it meant to belong to something. We became the monsters they called us because we had nothing else to be." She turned her head to look at Jake, still sleeping peacefully with his hand on Ember's scales. "These humans remembered what we forgot. They reminded our child. And now she has reminded us." Outside the viewports, 300 ships waited in the dark. But the weapons stayed cold. And when Scorith finally returned to her vessel, she carried something new with her. Hope. The Draken Remnant did not attack that day. They did not take Ember. Instead, they began something that no one had imagined possible. They began to listen. 20 years changed everything. The galaxy that Jake Holloway remembered from his younger days was gone. In its place was something strange and new and beautiful. something that no one could have predicted and everyone struggled to explain. Draken ships flew alongside human vessels on trade routes. Draken young played with human children on space stations and colony worlds. The ancient predators who had once burned civilizations now helped protect them. Their power turned from destruction to defense, and it had all started with one man and one frightened baby dragon. Jake sat on the observation deck of his retirement station, watching a yellow star sink behind the curve of the habitat. He was old now, his hair gone gray, and his joints stiff with age. The adventures were behind him. The long hauls through space, the narrow escapes, the strange discoveries in distant corners of the void. All of it was just memories now, but he wasn't alone. Ember had grown to her full size, and that size was hard to believe. Her body wrapped around the entire station, coiled in great loops of purple and silver scales that caught the light of the star and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Her wings could have blocked out the sun if she spread them. Her fire could have melted mountains. But here, wrapped around the small station where her human lived, she radiated nothing but warmth. The heat from her body kept the habitat comfortable through the endless cold of space. She was, in the most literal sense possible, keeping Jake warm. She purred constantly, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through the deck plates and made everything feel safe. It was the sound of contentment, of a creature who had found exactly where she belonged. Chloe visited often, bringing her grandchildren to meet the famous dragon. The kids weren't afraid at all. They climbed on Ember's coils and slid down her tail and played games in the spaces between her scales. She watched them with her 6 patient eyes, making sure they didn't fall, catching them with gentle movements when they stumbled. "Careful, little ones," she would say in her deep, rumbling voice. Auntie M would be sad if you got hurt. They called her Auntie M, and it started as a joke and became something real. Sam had passed away 5 years ago. Ember had mourned him deeply, refusing food for days and letting her scales fade to dull gray. But his children and grandchildren still worked on Draken ships, still maintained the engines that burned with familiar fire. His legacy lived on in every vessel that flew the routes he had once traveled. Nina Reyes had become the most famous xenobiologist in human history. Her research on Draken behavior had opened doors that no one knew existed. Young scientists came to interview Jake regularly, asking about those early days when everything seemed impossible. One evening, a young journalist arrived with questions. She was nervous and excited, clearly aware that she was speaking to a legend, even if that legend was just a tired old man in a comfortable chair. "How did you do it?" she asked after the formal questions were done. How did humanity turn the Draken from enemies into allies? What was the secret? Jake thought about the question for a long time. He looked out the viewport at Ember's vast body, at the scales that still glimmered with warmth even after all these years. He thought about that first moment in the wreckage when a frightened baby had pressed its snout against his helmet. "There was no secret," he said finally. "We just treated her like one of us. We fed her. We kept her warm. We told her she was good. That's all anyone really wants, isn't it? Human, Draken, whatever. Everyone just wants to know they matter. Everyone just wants to feel like they belong." The journalist wrote his words down carefully, but Jake could tell she didn't fully understand. She was young. She had grown up in a galaxy where humans and Draken were friends. She couldn't imagine a time when that friendship seemed impossible. "The universe is a lot cozier than people think," Jake continued. "We spend so much time being afraid of things that are different. We assume the worst about creatures we don't understand. But most of the time, if you just reach out with kindness, you find that the scary thing isn't so scary after all." "That seems too simple," the journalist said. "Simple things usually are." Jake smiled. "That's what makes them hard. Anyone can build a weapon. Anyone can start a war. It takes real courage to put down your defenses and say, I want to be your friend. It takes real strength to be gentle. After the journalist left, Jake made his way slowly to the outer observation bubble. Ember's great eye was visible through the transparent wall, watching him approach. It was the size of a small shuttle, that eye, but it still held the same expression he had seen in a frightened baby 20 years ago. Jake is tired, Ember said. Her voice was so deep now that it made the walls vibrate. Jake should rest. I'm fine, Em. Just wanted to look at the stars. Ember looks at stars with Jake. Ember always looks at stars with Jake. He sat down in his favorite spot, the place where Ember's warmth was strongest. Through the viewport, the universe spread out in all its vast cold beauty. Billions of stars, billions of worlds. Billions of stories being lived and told and forgotten. And here, in this tiny corner of infinity, one man and one dragon sat together in comfortable silence. Do you remember when I found you? Jake asked softly. Ember remembers everything. The cold, the fear. Then Jake came. Jake reached out to Ember when Ember was alone. Jake said Ember was going to be okay. I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know anything back then. Jake didn't need to know. Jake believed. That was enough. The star finished setting, leaving them in the gentle glow of distant lights. Ember's purr deepened, and the warmth around Jake increased slightly. She was always watching his temperature, always making sure he was comfortable. The other draken call me the bridge, Ember said. They say I am the one who connects our people to yours. They say I showed them that kindness is not weakness. What do you call yourself? Ember calls herself happy. Her great eye blinked slowly. Ember has Jake. Ember has family. What else is there? Jake reached out and placed his wrinkled hand against the warm scales beside him. 20 years ago, that simple gesture had meant hope and safety to a terrified child. Now it meant something deeper. It meant home. Nothing else, he agreed. Nothing else at all. Outside, the galaxy continued its endless turning. Stars were born and died. Species rose and fell. Wars were fought and forgotten. But in the grand story of the universe, one small chapter had been written that would be remembered for a very long time. The chapter about a man who found a dragon and gave her a home. The chapter about a species that reached out in kindness and changed everything. The chapter about the simple truth that the scariest things in the universe might just need someone to show them they are loved. Ember's purr rumbled through the station. Warm and constant and safe. The universe was cold. The universe was vast. The universe could be cruel and frightening and empty. But here, wrapped in dragon warmth, looking at the stars, everything was exactly as cozy as it needed to be. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.